If I know anything about adventures, it's that anytime kids want to join up for the supply run, things are going to go perfectly fine.
How you get so big getting food of this kind?
Hello and welcome into my spoiler review for the Season 2 episode of Star Wars Resistance called The Relic Raiders. I'm really excited to talk about this episode. As always, this episode gets back to some of the meat of what I think a lot of people have been wanting in this season. We see the First Order again, but at the same time we are continuing the storyline of how does the Colossus survive out in the wild reaches of space. So throughout this season we have seen the Colossus crew trying to overcome as they need to get their critical supplies. We saw them get hyperfuel, we've seen them practicing combat, we've seen them get food, we've seen them get fuel, and now we're just seeing them get more supplies in general. You have a city's worth of people surviving on the ship without a lot of ability to get new things, and so this has been their kind of continuing adventures and just surviving. I think that's an easy thing to forget. We're so used to seeing everybody on the Colossus and assuming the Colossus is fine, but this really is a scene where their survival is not necessarily just against, you know, the plots of the First Order, but just literally they're stuck in space and they don't know where to go or what to do. Today's adventure takes them to a planet that has a mysterious Force temple. This is also an episode where the children from Tehar, Kel and Elia, want to go on a journey with them. Now, this could be as simple as this is the first time they've really gone to a planet, a presumably non-dangerous planet. Up until now, you know, it's been shipwrecks or freakish ice worlds with dangerous temperatures or a mining rig. You know, this is the first time we go to what is presumably a habitable planet and a place where they're expecting to see people, they're expecting to see a town, they're expecting to trade with each other. So if the kids were going to ask to go anywhere, it would make sense that it's this run, right? It's the one that isn't supposed to have any danger. It's also very convenient that it happens to be the one that addresses the Force. Now, the kids from Tehar are two characters that have a lot of mystery around them, especially Elia. It's been my gut instinct for a while that she may have some Force sensitivity. She certainly seemed mysterious when we first met her, and she also had this sense that danger was coming in the Bebo episode, and it's been kind of hinted at, and just the idea that Kylo Ren went to their village and attacked their people. I mean, yeah, he could have been looking for different things. We learn in this episode that they had a Force temple on their world, which is something I'll get to in a minute as well. But it also could mean that Kylo was looking for her specifically. Maybe he didn't know it was her, but some Force-sensitive people. So it is in this episode where Force things may or may not happen that they asked to go. I really appreciate that they asked Kaz, and Kaz let them sneak aboard. I think it's a lot better than like the stereotypical, we're kids and we're just gonna sneak on the ship and it'll be fine, and it adds a little bit of intelligence to them. It shows us more motivation why they'd want to. You know, these kids are not brats. These are kids who have been very, very sympathetic. They are not people who are necessarily going to ignore what they're told. I mean, yeah, they kind of ignore Kaz and his specific instructions on the planet, but they're not going to just go so far as to leave the ship. They're smart enough to know that they should ask before to do it, and they know that Kaz will probably agree. So that it's a small point, but it's a point I appreciated. Just seeing them ask for permission, and then the plot doesn't become, I mean, it's not Buggles all over again. And while I liked that Buggles plotline, that makes more sense for a pet than it does for people. When our heroes get to the planet, they find out that it has been abandoned and it is very suspect. The kids run off because they find a temple. It's at this point that they mention that they used to have a temple back in their home. This also tracks because I've said this a couple of times now, their symbol that we see in the piece of wood when we first met them is also on one of the buildings on the planet that Poe and Kaz go to see in the Core Problem episode from the first season. So that seems like it can just be a generic Church of the Force like symbol and represent this as something that they would see, something they would be interested in. They immediately go to, could this be a Jedi temple? And a Jedi temple seems to be something that they would be less knowledgeable on themselves. One interesting thing to note here is that Kaz specifically mentions that he's never really believed much in the Force or the Jedi. He's got that I thought they were a myth kind of ideal that we see a lot of people, specifically, you know, some of our characters from The Force Awakens, think is a thing that they're not as familiar with the Force. We're seeing that in in some other material right now as well. And I suppose it would make sense for Kaz. It's ironic because the Force has probably saved his butt several times, and he doesn't necessarily believe in it. He also has that moment that I always find so funny. You have two people who are standing in a temple who are literally like, this is like our temple back home. And then he's like, I don't believe this is a thing. Which is like, okay, you're literally the only one in the room and like in the minority because two people versus one think it's a thing. But okay, Kaz, we'll just let you declare that for some reason. Which is just funny because I feel like that's a thing anybody does. Like, anytime you're met with an idea that you don't think is a thing, people have this tendency to want to declare that they don't think it's a thing. It's just a weird human trait. I thought that was kind of a funny moment for Kaz to do that as well. But it's once they enter the temple that they hear a voice calling, and they think that somebody's in distress. Now, my thought, as soon as I heard that voice, was, oh boy, this is a trap. This is one of those, like, Force ghost type things where somebody is calling out and it's like really the relic coming to like trap you there forever. And as it turns out, it was an actual person. It was the character of Mika Gray, who is somebody we saw in the trailer. Nice to see what context she appears in this episode, and she was a really fun character. There's a lot of contradiction in things she says over the course of the episode. I'm very curious to see how it plays out, because I think she's somebody who is playing her cards close to the chest. I think she's somebody who doesn't really want these people to really know who she is in full. And so I'm kind of excited going forward, as we see she's on the Colossus, so presumably we will see her again, to kind of learn a little bit more about her. But she describes this purification by suppression method, that they are in fact in a Jedi temple, but the Jedi temple is built over a Sith temple to kind of block the darkness within. I do find it kind of interesting that the Sith temple seems largely intact, that they didn't seem to want to disturb what's in it, they just literally stuck a thing on top of it. And this is something that we've seen before in current canon. It's been mentioned that the Jedi temple on Coruscant was actually built over a Sith, either a Sith temple or a holy site important to the Sith, that it used to be this basically dark side nexus type thing, and then that's where the Jedi decided to put the seat of their whole order, presumably to block that out. And then, of course, Mika mentions that these things always have a way of bubbling to the surface, which, of course, the Jedi Temple would then go on to be Palpatine's Imperial Palace, so it's kind of funny how things always work out. But in this context, we learned that the Sith Temple is kind of rising again because Mika herself is doing it. She is after the relic that is hidden within the temple and has fallen prey to the traps therein. One of the interesting things about here, like I said, is she mentions that the whole town has left over suspicion over the Sith temple kind of being opened and awakened again. She specifically says the people are superstitious. But then later at the end of the episode talks to Elia about the Force in a way that seems like she believes in it. She has probably seen some of these relics in action, so I find it curious. Does she either not think that the evil within the temple is still active, or is she trying to play cavalier to Kaz, and then we find out more about her later? I really enjoyed Mika and Kaz's interactions within the episode. She's definitely a tough-as-nails kind of lady, and Kaz is definitely Kaz. I think I've talked about it in reviewing the series before, but at any rate, I think that the show is aware of Kaz's kind of clumsiness, and an episode like this really indicates it. When Kaz falls into the trap with her, she says, I know exactly the type of person you are. You talk too much and know too little. At the end of the episode, she comments about how she'd be more afraid to be on a ship with Kaz than if there was some sort of super powerful energy bomb on board, and Kaz is like, yeah, that's fair, I deserve that. And that's the kind of thing that I enjoy, and that's the kind of thing that makes Kaz work for me, is it's not like, here is this glorious klutz, let us all look upon his awesome klutziness like it is this great thing. Instead of, it's Kaz's kind of character flaw. You know, Kaz doesn't really have too many personality flaws per se. He's a nice guy, he's caring, he tries to do the right thing, he tries to help the resistance. He has issues sometimes balancing the greater good with the good of his friends, which is something we see in his interactions with Tam and how he lied to her. But even when he screws up, everything is being done with the best of intentions. So to kind of keep him from being the stereotypical I'm good at everything, he's really just a guy with a heart of gold that's just really good at screwing everything up. And I enjoy watching that as a character. It works really well for me to see somebody who is just the normal, average, everyday guy doing all the same things I would do. Like, if I was in a Sith temple, I'd be stepping on the thing that electrocutes myself, and I'd be falling through holes. I find Kaz's klutziness to be highly relatable, personally, but I really liked seeing her reaction to it in the same way I enjoy seeing Torra's reaction to it. Everyone is just kind of like, oh, there's good old Kaz doing Kaz things. As I just said, as they go through the temple, Kaz keeps falling in the different traps. The electric one was kind of interesting. Kaz gets zapped by it, and then is dazed and continues to be dazed and is almost a little punch drunk when he goes for the relic. I wasn't sure if he was still punch drunk from the lightning or if the lightning made him susceptible to some sort of brainwashing from the relic itself, but either way he gets the sense knocked back into him when he falls to the ground. I kind of wondered if the lightning from that trap is actually the same thing we saw later on when the holocron power source like thing explodes. It was the same kind of animation. I wasn't sure if we were supposed to take a cue that it was the same kind of energy. Maybe the relic was powering all the traps in the temple itself. You know, did the temple become safe once the relic was... I guess the temple still was active after the relic was removed, so it couldn't have been the charger for the whole place, but maybe the place was charging the relic itself. She did call it a power source and not a knowledge source. So unless she means that metaphorically, maybe it's like a dark side battery, and that's why it was able to do what it was able to do. But bringing that up brings in the other really interesting thing that's going on in this episode, which is the relic hunting troopers. So the First Order shows up. The First Order has been on the heels of Mika. She mentions that she tried to dodge them at some other point and was not able to. So they're following her there. They're to the point where they blow up her ship. You know, they don't blow up the resistance ships, but they blow up hers. So they know who she is, and they know they need to stop her. Versus our heroes, they're just kind of investigating. So you can kind of see they've had this back and forth sort of thing, and probably for a long time, because she said she's been looking for this relic for 2 years. Now here comes another interesting discussion on where we are in the timeline. Mika says that the First Order Raiders are looking for relics for the Supreme Leader. Now, we are at a point where the change in leadership of the Supreme Leader is going to happen if it hasn't already. We know that Snoke is very interested in relics. If you look at the Last Jedi visual dictionary, he has all sorts of things that used to belong to Palpatine, that belong to various Darksiders. So Snoke is absolutely somebody who has been trying to gather up all of these things. I think that tracks too, that Mika has been looking for this, she said, for the last 2 years. When she gets these items, she didn't say that she wants to sell them or that she wants to collect them. She says she wants to put it in a place where no one else can get them. So she, to me, is the type of person that is, if I had to guess, and this is speculation, she's the person who's trying to fight against the First Order by taking their dark side relics away. It's not unlike a character that we saw in Dooku Jedi Lost, for that matter. Only she was a Jedi versus this is a presumably normal average person. We could be at a point where Kylo is now the Supreme Leader, and we don't really know. I don't think it would be outside the realm of possibility that Kylo would want relics the same as Snoke. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that he at least wouldn't care if they're still getting collected, at least not enough to halt things. So again, I'm very curious. Are we still during The Last Jedi? Have we now actually gone past? It's my gut instinct that we will end up past The Last Jedi, and the reveal at the end of the mid-season is going to be, oh man, The Last Jedi actually already happened, as opposed to getting the moment where, like, Kaz gets the communication from Leia. Now, one thing I don't know that I will say before people start getting too excited is, I don't know what, but I know a lot of things get referenced in Star Wars Resistance Reborn, which is a novel by Rebecca Roanhorse that has come out recently. I have started but not finished this novel, and it's distinctly possible the answer to the question, did the Resistance hear Leia, is in that book. I don't know because I haven't read it yet. Also, please, I haven't read it yet, so don't put Resistance Reborn spoilers in this video for my own sake and the sake of anybody else who's just checking out a video on this topic, not expecting spoilers for something else. With that out of the way, my gut feeling, having not finished this season nor finished that book, is that Kaz is going to end up getting Leia's message, but on a delay. And that's why they don't respond to Leia at the end of The Last Jedi. I'm not basing that off of anything real. That's just my guess as we go forward. That's what I would do if I were writing the show. I would make it a, oh hey, actually, surprise, all this stuff happened when you weren't looking. Another thing I really appreciated about this episode was how it deals with the Force and the Force Temple, and you have the kids from Tehar, and they feel a certain way about the Force, and Kaz doesn't fully believe in the Force, and you even see the Sith artifact in action, and you see it blowing up, but you never really see in the show an answer to the Force. There are so many little beats and moments that kind of make you wonder, like the kids find the temple because they follow the butterflies, and there's a point where Kel and Ilia are in the hallway, and Kel's like, oh man, we're lost, we need a miracle, and CB-23 shows up. There's another point where Kaz is falling after the walls have started spinning, and it looks like he has somehow used the Force to stop himself from falling, but then really it's Mika who's caught him from behind. And I have to think that's intentional. There were so many little moments that it's like, was this or wasn't this the Force? That I think it was an intentional kind of play with, is this fate, is this destiny? And even kind of showing how the Force can be at work, but how characters like Kaz could not necessarily believe in it. It was just kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. We know we're going to see the Force used actively in the show because the clip of Kylo at the end has Kylo using the Force on Agent Tierney, so it's not like the show is going to be vague forever as to whether or not the Force works. But it was kind of interesting in this episode to see it play like that. Another big thing in this episode that I haven't talked about yet is Freya! Freya is out, she's doing things, it's so exciting. Freya and Torra are teaming up, and they're out there, like, getting the job done while Kaz is running around in temples, which is completely unsurprising. It's pretty fun, too, because the voice actress who plays Freya is also the voice director. She wears two hats over the course of the show, so it was really neat to see her get to not only direct, but actually get to hear her. So that was a fun little tidbit, and it's nice seeing her in action. It's nice seeing the Aces get to do more. Based off of the trailer, I think we're going to see that more, but we've spent so much time with Torra, it's nice to get to know some of the other members of the team. I also really appreciated how the episode ends with Mika at least temporarily joining up with the Colossus. This seems to really be a show about finding people and giving them a chance. Sometimes it's like the case with the Engineer 2 weeks ago, where it doesn't really work out and the person isn't somebody you can trust, but maybe sometimes the person is someone you can trust. And I really like how this is a show of people kind of finding each other and growing together as a team. But those are my thoughts this week. I thought it was spectacular. I am right there with a lot of you that I'm excited to see Tam again and see what Tam is up to. But I thought this was really nice, and it was a chance for Resistance to kind of build into the bigger mythology of the galaxy and the bigger mythology of the themes and stuff that happens in Star Wars, because it's not something the show gets to do very often. But please leave me a comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. If you're not already, follow us on all the socials. And until next time, keep it real and fly casual.
Cooking can be fun.